Welcome to Remote First Innovators, the podcast for leaders who are scaling companies built for the modern world. We sit down with founders and experts in distributed work to explore how they've broken down barriers and solved the real-world challenges of growing and running remote teams. Each episode dives into practical strategies for onboarding, IT, security, compliance, and everything it takes to build a thriving distributed business. No fluff, no theory, just what works when your team is everywhere and operations never stop. Here are your hosts, Robert Phelps and Jake Gump.
Welcome to another episode of Remote First Innovators podcast. Today's guest brings a unique perspective to the remote work conversation, one that blends health, innovation, leadership, technology, and intentional living in a way we haven't explored much on the show yet. Michael Levy is a healthcare executive and digital health entrepreneur with more than 20 years of leadership across healthcare systems, technology, and social impact. He's the CEO and co-founder of the Digital Health Institute for Transformation, an internationally recognized nonprofit that has built a global community of over 5,000 innovators, launched health innovation hubs around the world, and pioneered community-driven innovation programs. He's also the co-founder of Blue Door Group, a growth agency recognized among the top healthcare companies worldwide, where he advises startups and health systems on strategy and commercialization. In addition, he serves as a venture partner with Springtide Ventures, supporting early-stage digital health companies. Earlier in his career, Michael was the first entrepreneur in residence at University of North Carolina Center for Health Innovation, where he designed UNC's digital health program and launched the nationally recognized Digital Health Innovation Sprint. He's held senior leadership roles at organizations like UNC Healthcare, UCLA Health, and the University of Miami Health System, leading large-scale transformations and multi-million-dollar operation turnarounds. Beyond the titles, what really drew me to this conversation is how deeply Michael thinks about how people design their lives, especially when given the freedom that remote work creates. He challenges the idea that health is just physical, reframes success as intentional choices made daily, and shares frameworks that help people win small so that they can win big at work, at home, and in life. I'm excited for this one because it opens a whole conversation of every remote professional needs to hear. Michael, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Jake.
Yeah, man, that was I will say that's probably the longest intro I've ever done. But man, you've got a list of titles, and I'm just so excited to have you on the show.
Well, I appreciate it. Those titles are given to me based off of, I think, just the process I hold myself accountable to. They don't really mean anything other than what the system has defined my actions as.
Love that. And seeing UNC in there, so go Tar Heels. So that's good too. And I can just tell you personally, since our last conversation, I've had some, small wins, and I've just been pumped for this podcast today because just, as soon as I got in here, I was pumped with you, and I, it really is little things that you can instantly impact, and I can't wait to share this with people listening. Health is such a big deal, especially nowadays. Everybody's trying to revamp, trying to get that edge, right? Whether you're athletic, whether you're, in a leadership position, and whether you're just trying to take care of yourself and your family. And I just think that there's a lot of tips and tricks. And just honestly, I felt, coming away with just our conversation the other day, man, I got some things I can implement really quickly. It's going to be a game changer. So I'm just so excited to tell everybody about this and just, unpack all of it with you. But for listeners that are meeting you for the first time, how would you describe what you do and what problem you're trying to solve?
Most direct way to answer that question, Jake, is to talk about process driving outcomes. We tend to be a goal-oriented society where we imagine the life we want to have, whether it's a number in the bank account, whether it's the wife and 2.5 children with a house and a white picket fence, whatever that future goal that we're taught to think about in life, we are supposed to obsess over. But we're not taught and we don't practice with obsession a process, a way of living, a way of thinking, and a way of acting that allows us a level of fortitude and grit to accomplish daily the mechanism of that outcome. And what I mean is, you know, when we say how are we going to get those things, we don't really have a framework to operate against, right? And so I think at the core of what I do, whether it's for a uh, international health system, a struggling community, or my family, or myself when I'm looking in the mirror, is I simplify the process down to a 4D framework. The 4D framework is something that you don't need to have answers for. You need to have a process, an ability to start. And that 4D framework is as follows: discover, define, design, deliver. And let's just break that down for a moment. Let's just say my goal is health, and my biggest area of opportunity is nutrition, right? I don't need to ask myself, what do I need to do to have better nutrition today? I need to first ask myself, what does my nutrition look like today? So discover is about tracking your current reality, right? And so as it relates to a starting point, it allows us to go from a think big, I want to change the way I eat, I want to look different, I want to be healthier, that's think big, to start small start, which is discover, track. So don't change anything, don't do anything, just identify what you're putting into your body first on a piece of paper in one of the fitness apps. You track it. You will very quickly learn through a level of visibility and transparency of what you're eating. And in that, you're going to then say, well, let me go to the next D, define. Is that good food? Am I happy with those nutrients that are going into my body? Will that lead me to where my goals are situated? If you are not happy with that, then you say, well, what would better nutrition be? Right. So you're defining. In this act of cutting down the think big into small steps and to chunks allows the mind to build the muscles to have the confidence to start making changes. And so when you think about the third D, which is design, what might I put into my body tomorrow that might be slightly better than I put into my body today? Not changing the entirety of my nutritional profile, but one small improvement. Because if I can do that daily, I'm now delivering instant results, right? To the process, to the inputs. And if you do that over and over and over again, that's what I meant in our previous conversation called stacking wins. If you do that process, discover, define, design, deliver on a daily basis with the things that you care about, 1 year from now, you will be transformed. There's no ins and outs about it. It is 100% certain that with intentionality and a process that goes with that intention comes transformation. So then what is the model of transformation? Discover, define, design, deliver.
Man, I love that. Very easy to follow. Man, I want to just ask a bunch of questions right off of that, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. And so I'll try to keep it more, in line here. You mentioned the idea of a flexible human stack the last time we talked. What does that mean really in practice? Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think in today's world, whether we're talking about remote working or we're talking about launching a business or we're talking about health transformation, in whatever context, we should think of ourselves as general contractors. Okay. In the sense that if we can ask the right questions, if we can discover with full completeness and define what we need based off of what we don't have, right? We can then go out and get the resources, whether it's human resources or technical resources or nutritional resources, if we're going back to the nutritional equation that we talked about, to compile the architecture of success, right? And that's what I mean flexible human stack is I don't know what my needs are going to be to service my customers in a month, right? So I need to have a very flexible ecosystem of talent that I can draw from at any moment in time to build the specific answer to the unknown question that's going to emerge, right? And so if I can take a very open approach of my workforce, similar to how a general contractor evaluates all the labor that they use to build a house and care for a house, whether it's the plumbers or the electricians or the scaffolders or whatever need they have based off of the wants of the homeowner and the architect, they're going to sequence the resources and the team appropriately to build the vision of the house that's on the blueprint, right? And that's what I mean by a flexible human stack is that as a business owner, I can't have a fixed workforce that is set in stone because I don't know exactly what my needs are going to be in 6 months. So I have hundreds of different resources that I can pull in at any given time based off of the need of a project or a scope.
Why do you believe, the traditional W-2, office first model is increasingly misaligned with how people actually live today?
Individual freedom and meaning and purpose is at an all-time high, and won't go away in this century. This is the century of intrinsic motivation, right? And though we all need to earn a living, money without meaning is no life at all, right? And so what we're seeing as a winning equation or combination is for individuals not to be treated as an employee where they're there to do a job, but as a limited resource that has a skill set, but has greater meaning to their life and world around them. So if you lock somebody up and expect them to be 100% tied to your agenda, you're squeezing their curiosity out of them. You're squeezing the motivation to learn and to grow, right? And so as we approach and mature in this 21st century, the best resource is one who's continuously learning, who's continuously curious, who's hungry and eating elsewhere and bringing that added knowledge and that added intelligence to their positions, right? And you can't do that under a traditional W-2 framework very easily. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I'm saying it's going to be increasingly hard. And that's why we look at portfolio life as a winning culture where you give your talent the freedom to work other jobs, to create and launch their own businesses, because it's within that construct of freedom where they're able to bring their best to what they do for you.
Love that. They oftentimes, you see the organizations, they often underestimate the human side of distributed teams. Do you see remote work as more of a privilege, a responsibility, or both?
I think it's both. It's a privilege as a society to be in the day and age where we can work in whatever environment we want. But there's also a level of responsibility that we as individuals maximize the opportunity. and deliver not just for the employer, but for themselves and their family. And this is where I think, life has gotten very complex in this equation. And we haven't changed the way we educate. We haven't changed the way we mature as individuals to meet the new requirements of this ecosystem. And it's in that manner that you have to look at health as a 360-degree equation across a ever evolving, continuously developing life, where the health of your body, mind, spirit matches the health of your relationships, matches the health of your productivity. And that's why it really is your responsibility to ask the question, how are you doing across all of these areas? Are you happy with it? And it is you to hold yourself accountable to implementing the continuous learning methods and improvement cycles to better each of those positions as best as you can, day in and day out.
So important. And let's get into health, as a system. And you talk about health as much more than just physical fitness. And so I want you to kind of define for everybody how you define health holistically.
Health holistically is generally tied to, let's just say, the traditional behavior, environmental, physical, biological, genetics of your being. But if I break that out into sub segments, we're talking about everything I care about. So when I then say, who cares about having a healthy marriage? Who cares about having a healthy bank account? Who cares about having a healthy cabinet? Who cares about having healthy friendships? Then health is way more than my physical fitness or my mental well-being. It's a combination of every activity in my life that I engage in, and therefore that first step of discovery comes with saying, "Am I happy with my bank account? Am I happy with my marriage? Am I happy with my cabinet of food? Am I happy with my wardrobe?" All of the things that I care about. So health is caring. And so caring is intentional. And if you want to impact health, you have to be intentional with what you care about.
I love that. I think about my own life, and you go through stages, right, where you care about your looks really early in life. You care about a lot that your priorities change. Let's put it that way, right? And some things you care about a lot, some things you don't, and then you kind of flux. And then I find myself, at some points with my personality, just trying to fix everything at once, right? You get to a point where you get fed up, and you're like, I'm not happy with everything's at, and I'm just going to try to fix everything. And why do you think that this is maybe more so for me, but for anybody else, but I'm sure other people, deal with this, but why do you think people struggle when they just try to fix everything at once?
Energy flows where focus goes, right? And so if you focus on everything, you focus on nothing, because you can't deliver the amount of energy to be impactful if you don't have focus in the areas that are most opportunistic for you to change, right? And so this is where, think big, start small, start really matters, because we might want to change our whole life, but changing our whole life overnight is a recipe that leads to disaster. So then you say, what is one thing tomorrow that I can do better than today, right? And this is where the kind of equation of continuous improvement is transformative, because zero point zero 0.01 times 365 is doing one small thing a day over 365 days. And if you times that by 10, which is a decade, from now until 10 years from now, I do one thing a day differently and better, your entire life will change, right? But we, as a society, like to try to have a quick win, a light switch transformation overnight, whether it's taking pills or winning the lottery, or choose the diet du jour. That's not the answer. The answer is stacking wins, and this comes down to like, what is one thing you can do that's within your control that gives you the confidence and the conviction to do it again tomorrow. Because it's when you do those little things and you get good at doing those little things, you will start doing more little things. And as you do more little things, that's when the big things come.
That's so true. I'm reminded of a story. I was just watching Kobe Bryant being interviewed, and they were asking him why he decided to start waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning. And he said he realized that he could get more practice in, and that the more practice day in, day out, eventually over the years, he said, it doesn't matter what people do in the summer. He said they'll never be able to
Never catch up. I mean, that, and I live by that same type of, you know, equation, and it is a quantitative equation when you break it down, right? So like from 4 to 6, I'm up. I get up. I get 2 hours in a day, every single day, Saturday and Sunday included. And when you take those 2 hours and you multiply it by 365 days, you get an extra month of full work. I live 13 months in a standard 12-month calendar, right? And so when you're adding in value time like that, you're going to see major transformation, not just transformation, major transformation. And I'm not suggesting that that's the equation for everyone, but it started with me on a much smaller scale, right? I remember a conversation with my wife, my mom. This was, I had just taken over the business office for the Department of Radiology at UCLA. I think I was 25 years old. I was partying at the time, right? I had a lot of a heavy social life in LA. But now I was having significant responsibilities at work, more than I knew how to handle. And I called her, I was like, yeah, I said, Mom, I need some help. Like, how do I get it all done? And she's like, well, you just extend your day. You just find a time, you either in the morning or the evening, you just get it done. And it was such a simple answer. But it was a prioritization exercise to say, what's my trade-off? Am I willing to trade off anything? And how do I create that time for that extra rep, right? And I think that's where you just got to stop in your life, and you got to think about what you care about, and make time for what you care about, right? And this gets back to, focusing on what matters most. I'll cross-sec that with kind of a pretty famous saying that says, you measure what you want to manage, right? And with measurement comes a level of transparency of whether or not you're managing it. So if health is a system, I measure my health across all aspects. It's having very honest conversations with myself, whether my marriage is going well. Am I happy with the marriage? How many days a month do I bicker and fight with my wife? Well, if I can count that, and I'm not happy with that number, then my what I care about should be to decrease that number, right? So then it's about, well, how do I personally take accountability and responsibility for me decreasing the amount of time I bicker with my wife? What are the tough conversations I have to have? What is the self-reflection and self-development work that I need to do to have a better relationship with my wife? Again, if that's what you care about, you may not care. If you don't care, don't be surprised if your marriage ends, right? But I'm 15 years celebrated my marriage, and we're doing better than we ever have done before, because I apply the same methodology of how I care for myself with how I care with my wife, which is, what can I do to be effective? Not necessarily right, but be effective. because being right always isn't being effective.
Well, let's be honest here. You just learn to do what you're told.
like I said, effective is not always right.
For all the men listening right now, you will learn to listen, and one way or another.
That's very true. Very true indeed.
So it's a, I consider myself an expert communicator because I learned to communicate in any mood, in any type of vulnerable situation, and you have to be um, intentional with everything. I'm going on 10 years, and so, and when you think you have it all figured out, you don't, and you're constantly be learning. And just like with our conversation the other day, what really sparked my thought process was, what can I do right now that's going to be a small win? And I just realized, man, if I just get 8 hours, I have to have 8 hours of sleep. A lot of people are just like, I'm good on 5, and I don't see how they do it. Now sometimes I have to be, because you're just getting things in, right? But I think that when I started with just 8 hours of sleep, I knew that that was the foundation of being able to do everything else, and stacking wins on top of that. And so I just started with intentional time with my wife, and a great night of sleep. And wow, is it just a game changer? So if I can focus immediately on priority number one, getting good sleep, and focusing on my wife, I know that I'm laying the foundation for a great day. So that was something I took away just immediately.
Let me ask you this, and carry forward to some of the points I made earlier about tracking and measuring, i.e., discovering. Do you have a wearable, a sleep wearable?
Yes, I have.
Do you wear that with your while you go to sleep?
Yes, and actually, I do track my sleep, and I also have a CPAP as well, which helps me give me a sleep score.
Okay, and if you started really asking yourself how to get a better night's sleep, some questions you might ask would be, do I give myself enough time to digest from dinner to when I go to sleep? Uh, what do I eat 2 hours before for dinner that supports my digestive system when I'm sleeping? What supplements might support my recovery during sleep? Right. So when you start getting obsessed, let's say, and caring about sleep, the top line is, are you getting 8 hours of sleep? Then peeling back the layers to say, well, what other aspects can I implement and care about to get a better night's sleep? So, for instance, someone who was born and raised in New Orleans, drinking alcohol was and has been a large part of my life. But as I started asking the questions of how I improve my sleep, alcohol became such a big driver to good sleep or bad sleep that I then ran little experiments with myself to say, well, what's the difference between beer, and what's the difference between wine, and what's the difference between liquor as it related to my sleep, right? And what I found personally is that uh, beer is worse than wine is worse than liquor, and liquor is better than all of them as it relates to impacting heart rate variability, body temperature, and overall recovery for sleep itself. That said, nothing replaces no alcohol, right? And so that's just one, data set that I would discover against, define my relationship with, like, am I going to make a trade off here? Do I care about it enough to go from beer to wine, wine to liquor, liquor to nothing? And lo and behold, after 4 or 5 years of me going through the discover, define, design, deliver process, I have my gin or my tequila once or twice a week, but that's it. Where I used to drink every day, and that used to be part of my normal habit. But because I care more about the next day's performance than I do about the way I end my night. I made the trade-offs to allow this substance into my life in a very refined and restricted way based off my knowledge. And that took years. It didn't happen overnight. It happened over little experiments, building confidence and slowly nudging me towards the way I interact with alcohol today.
I did have a friend that said there is different quality of tequila for sure, right? And the higher quality, he's a health nut, and he's like, hey, drink the higher quality of tequila. It's not as hard on you. And I was like, really? I didn't know that. So there is little wins, little kind of things you can do there if you if you partake, right? I wanted to kind of think about someone who listens to the podcast and they're trying to start stacking wins. And what do you think is like the least scary thing to win at first?
Going for walks,
Absolutely.
moving your body is incredibly important. A 15-minute, 20-minute walk every day can improve your emotional state, your physical state, can deliver greater energy to you over time. It is a very effective way to manage your stress. And if you do it with your wife, it's an incredible opportunity to get dedicated time to talk and connect. And that is something that should be non-negotiable, in my opinion, to anyone, unless you can't walk. If literally you can't walk, then that's a barrier you're gonna struggle with. But if you are able to walk, however hard it may be or easy, walking is, I think, the lowest barrier to entry for transformation. There's tremendous amount of research and studies that support this outside of what I would consider your anecdotal study, which is go for a walk and tell me how you feel afterwards, right?
I will say it's a big deal when you go for a walk. Like, I was able to get a good night's sleep. I was able to take a walk before our meeting here, and if I take a small walk, man, my whole day is so much better. I'm so much more clear. I feel better about myself. There is something addicting to just intentionally stacking these little small wins.
Well, I'd say, specifically for remote workers, right? Like, this is an opportunity where freedom can be met with culture, whereby schedule walking meetings where you have a call. Ask yourself, can I take this call while walking? And you and your colleague get on a phone and walk together. And that's that. You get it in while you're working. What greater privilege do you have, right? And if you do that, you're likely gonna have more fire and more energy to that conversation. Likely be more productive. Maybe have better, bigger ideas, and your culture's winning, let alone your body. So I think walking is a tremendous asset to yourself. And as you get good with walking, you say, well, is there are there other aspects of walking that could be supportive if I'm really good at walking every day? Could you throw a little 5 pound, 10 pound weight in the backpack and add that to your walk? That's called rucking. That allows you to increase your heart rate gently, and have more metabolic impact in effect, and will challenge you that next layer, that next stack, right? And then you can increase it from there as you wish. But the idea is to start and take measured kind of um, appreciation for the effect of the activity, and then see how could you layer it on one more thing to give you that next level of engineering towards that activity.
Love that. I think that I also I just wanted to mention, if you can't talk while you're walking, you're going too fast. Slow down a little bit. I've got friends that can run and talk to me at the same time. I've literally been have half a conversation. I'm like, "Are you running?" Like, he's like, "Yeah, I've been running for like the last 20 minutes." I'm like, "Wow." And that's a true thing, right? If you're running too hard, if you can't talk while you're running, right? The same goes with your walking, right? I know some people that you might start out walking, I and as we've been talking about this, I was thinking about my, transitioning from, I was an outside salesman, coming in to going fully remote. And I was traveling a lot, walking, going to offices, going into the office some. And I was just thinking about how unstructured I was when I first got into the office full time, and just having nowhere to go, and nothing really, you get it, I kind of think about Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. You get ready from, top up, right? And no good pants on and stuff like that, or that just pajama pants. And, so what do you think you would say to someone who's, coming in the office, uh, the remote workers that, they feel stuck, overwhelmed, they just feel, like unstructured in their day, being remote and being stuck at the house?
It starts with, asking yourself what matters to you and what you care about first. Um, self, family, work, friends, right? And saying, if given the opportunity to architect the perfect day, if I wake up at 4 and I go to sleep at 8, which is my schedule, um, I have, roughly 16 hours of time in my day. So how do I take those 16 hours and care for myself, my family, my friends, and my work? What's the allocation of effort? And how do I time block it in a way where I prioritize what's most important, right? Given the freedom to build the day of my dreams, I'll focus on myself, I'll focus on my family, I'll focus on my work, and then I'll focus on my friends. And that's how I've built the time blocking that I live by if given the opportunity every single day. So, between 4 a.m. and roughly 9:30 to 10 a.m., that's self-care and family care. That's it. That's what I do. I'm in the gym. I do meal prep. I cook my girls breakfast every morning. I make their lunches. I get time with my family. That's when I become alive, such that when I turn on for work, I've given myself to my family and myself already. So now I'm ready to give myself to work, right? And so when I then give myself to work and I'm there for all of my staff and teammates and clients, when I'm done, the leftovers for my friends, right? And so it's a level of prioritization and intentionality of like, how do you ensure that you are building yourself up? Like I always think about like when you're in an airplane and the steward says, take the mask and put it over yourself first and then put it over your children. I mean, that's the same principle. You got to give yourself oxygen before you give others oxygen, else you're going to deplete yourself, right? And so I think that's the chore, or the challenge, or the opportunity, depending on how you want to look at it, for everyone right now, to take a blank piece of paper out. And if you sleep 8 hours a night, you then have 16 hours of waking time. That's your day. How do you carve that up into 3 to 4 days in one? Right? I always say I live 3 days in normal people's one day because of the way I structure those 16 hours.
And let's think about, so you have your structure, and, you're going to start stacking wins now. You know, why is something as simple as waking up and making your bed actually powerful?
Because it's the first win of the day and it's the easiest. I think now to re answer your question as what's the easiest thing to do for an individual, it's to make their bed right when they get out of bed, right? I think what you're looking for is, we're both simple and complex human beings, and our psychology is rewarded by uh, starting a positive cycle versus starting a negative cycle. So if we can get up, number one, with ease and not lay around, and we get out of bed and we see this bed that we were just sleeping in, and we have the opportunity to make that bed, and know that when we make that bed, when we come back to it later in the evening, it's going to be a made bed that we can get into. That's a win. That's a stackable win, because you've done something that required a choice. You stopped and you chose, I'm going to take the extra energy because I care about coming back into a made bed. I care about a level of order in my room. I'm going to make the bed. It might take you 30 seconds. It might take you 3 minutes. It might take you 5 minutes. But that energy is the first positive interaction with a choice on the day. So then when you are to ask yourself, what's the next choice I have? It's going to be building on that first win. So you've got to figure out a way to start stacking those wins, and making your bed is a great first step. But the next could be going for a walk, right? The next could be going down to the cabinet, and instead of eating a Pop Tart, you say, I'm going to have a banana. These are the choices that we have in today's age, we're kind of oversaturated with choice, which also makes it very difficult to have control. And that's why right now the biggest challenge we have is slowing the decision making down, to the point where we ask ourselves, is this really what we want to be doing with our moment? Is this really good for me if I care about these things? Is this really what's going to lead me to a better day tomorrow?
To expand on that, as we was talking the other day, you were kind of saying, choose your hard. When you get to these choices, you're going to choose your hard. And I thought about that with my kids. I thought about that with myself, and in regards to, either you're going to deal with, uh, you know, the weight issue, or you're working out, right? And you were talking about even with your daughters, right? Choose your hard, and just unpack that too, because I just thought it was so. I mean, it resonated a lot with me because, especially being a former athlete, I used to put the work in, and other things became really easy when you put that work in, and you don't realize it sometimes. What kind of exponential, if you do things daily, especially working out, things become pretty easy to you, on the athletic front. But you had to put the work in, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, like, at the start and end of it all, life is effing hard. There's no other way to cut it. But there's different outcomes for choosing your hard. So hard today may be going to the gym, eating right, saying no to boozing all the time, but it's going to lead to easier longevity, easier well-being. Easy today may be McDonald's, maybe couch surfing, maybe clubbing, but hard is diabetes. Hard is heart attacks. Hard is not being able to walk when you're older. So when we say choose your hard, no matter which way you go, you're gonna have to face hard. So do you face it now with the tough decisions that you have, or do you face it later when you are going to be riddled with guilt and remorse? And so life is a is a hard equation, whether it's now or later. And the choose your hard comes down to, generally in life, if you choose the hard today, it's going to be easy later.
And I mean, you probably have these conversations a lot. Why do you think people just, I mean, it's easy to go to McDonald's, right? I mean, it's easy just to deal with, man, I just do not want to cook tonight. I get that all the time. I just like, I do not want to take the energy to do that. But at some point you kind of just realize I'm tired of eating crap. And I know if I continue to eat like this, for me and my family, it's not going to bode well. We're going to deal with medical issues. We're going to go to the doctor. The laundry list goes on, right? So, I mean, what do you think is kind of the most common? Is it fun? Is it just easy? I mean, do people just always take the easy way out?
I think there's kind of a confluence of factors from, the manana culture, which says I'll start it tomorrow, or I'll start it at New Year's. I'll start it, later when maybe, I have more energy. There's also the education. We don't really know what these things are doing to our body. Therefore, maybe I can justify being full today, versus, really the underlying mechanics of the foods I put into my body and how they actually affect my body. To, I don't have, the money for organic foods. So therefore I'm choosing, the less expensive option. I think there's a lot of different, you know, factors at play that challenge people to make healthier choices in life. I would say this gets back to simply a moment of choice and conviction that says, I've got to short circuit my behavior and I've got to start stacking wins in the right areas. So if I look in the mirror at myself and give me a choice, is now the time, is today the day when I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to go through the drive-through. I'm going to go in the refrigerator and I'm going to take out what I have and I'm going to satiate myself through this manner. And if I can take some pride out of that, that might be the one needle, so to speak, that puts me over the edge as it relates to short circuiting and starting on that positive cycle. But I think that think big, start small, start mentality is what we need to adhere to, because generally the think big, don't start at all mentality is what we align to right now. We have these great hopes, we have these great aspirations, we want to be this, that, or the other, but we don't break it down into what's the smallest form of that I can start today, and how do I build the discipline to continue that, such that going to the gym leads me to spending time on a machine, which then leads me to going to the gym, being on the machine and trying another machine, and then so on and so forth, right? And so, just getting to the gym is hard. So if getting to the gym is hard, then focus on literally just getting ready for the gym, right? And so you break it down into its parts, and really, when you actually kind of break some of these things down into its smallest parts, there might be hundreds of parts in a decision, like should I go to McDonald's or not, right? And so what we're not saying, what I'm not advocating for is overnight transformation. What I am advocating for is discover what those parts are, define what you can comfortably do today, design a system where you are thinking about that tomorrow and the next day, and deliver against that process day in and day out. And within a few months to a year, you will be a different person.
And so you were talking about, that you kind of just mentioned that you kind of identified a framework there, right? So you were talking earlier about discover, define, design, and deliver, and calling that the 4D framework. And I written that down in my notes from our last conversation. I just, I thought it was, a lot of people have little snippets or little salesy type of things, but I feel like this is, everybody should be doing this, and you can apply this type of framework to any aspect, right? But let's start at the first one, discover. And why is discovery so important before you even start taking action?
All right, Jake, you just landed on a deserted island. You know nothing about that island. What are you going to do? Start cooking dinner? You got to figure out like, well, what's on this island, right? So without having any answers, without knowing anything, you've never been to this island before. What are you going to do? You've got to go back to a confident place where you build a knowledge base to act on, right? So if you have no knowledge of this island, what's the one thing you can do? Discover, observe, learn, ask. What does this island have for me? How can I potentially live off this island? What are the resources in this island, right? And that's what Discover is. It's about not having answers, but questions. So with questions comes facts, right? Data. And that's why today's age, when we get into like digital and data, it's so powerful because it reinforces this operating model. We have all the data in the world today. So we should be answering questions every single day around the data that's most meaningful to us, right? Like, for instance, what do I eat? Right? Well, what do you have in your fridge? Is that good nutrients? Will that give me the sustenance for the entire day? Whatever those questions are, that's for you to start asking, and that's what Discover really means. It's literally waking up having zero knowledge of what today could offer you and asking the questions that matter most to you to understand the next part, which is what is this data? What are the resources on this island? What do they mean to me? Can I eat them? Can I build with them? Will I be able to survive with them? That's what define means. How does that impact my current reality? And how might I build a future reality given this knowledge base, right? Because if we're looking at today versus the future, it's about what does this mean for me today? And if I do something with these resources, what might it mean in the future, right? And that's where define comes. And so when you think about design, you're saying, well, shit, if I know what these resources mean today to me, and I can envision a world where I put these resources to use daily, which is the future, how might I design the roadmap to get there? How might my next days and days upon days lead me to that North Star, that set of goals, right? And then delivery is the process of putting that into action and then evaluating along the way whether I'm going right, left, or straight with that model.
There's a lot of data that you can get from asking good questions, and then knowing, which path to take quickly, right? You get stranded on a desert island. A lot of people think, I'm just going to get a stick and I'm going to start stabbing some fish. There could be a fruit tree. You could just run up and get some fruit right now, right? If you just go and search and find and discover. And the same thing goes in your life, I think, as you're talking. You have a bunch of data, but there is a path that you can carve out that's the quickest way. That's the most effective way to be doing something, right?
That's it. I mean, we have to kind of all become, scientists to some extent, right? Researchers to some extent, and get excited about the unknowns, and challenge ourselves to um, ask those questions that are unknown to us, and not be scared based off of what the data says, right? It's like, put a scale in your bathroom. If you want to understand how much you weigh day in and day out, don't be scared with what it says. Get excited about it. Are you happy with the weight that it says? If you're not, what can I do about it? What might impact, right? How might I design a tomorrow that might put pressure on some of these areas that could impact my weight. I mean, this is the same as I can now go to financials. Like, what do I spend money on? Let me track that. Let me answer this question. Am I happy with what I have in my bank account? Do I spend on the right things? Does this practice lead to profitability or a negative surplus? So on and so forth. It's data. Data gives you the information to define your current reality, and it gives you the basis to form a future better reality. But then the human resource stack or the flexible stack of resources around you is the inputs that help you design the roadmap to get to that better reality. And then it's your conviction to stay true to that process, which is delivery.
And I think sometimes you can get through this framework a lot. I mean, let's just be honest. You hear a lot of things, but do you truly ask yourself some of those questions? And because I think that whenever I'm put into a situation and someone actually poses a question to me, and it really makes me think. Yeah, you can listen to this conversation, but actually ask it to yourself and think what you would answer in that scenario. And I think you'd be surprised with some of the answers. Because when we talked the other day, I've heard this 1,000 times, but have I really asked myself this question and answered it honestly about, the stacking the wins? Am I doing the things I should be doing day in, day out? The things I know, no one knows yourself better than yourself, right? You can answer those questions honestly. And if you're honest with yourself, that's probably the first step, right? In discovery and defining and designing and delivering. Some people get through those pretty quickly, but let's say you do those items and you keep going and you use this framework. I mean, what's going to help you be? I mean, sometimes people are good 3 to 5 months, but then they just, something emotional, life just knocks you off track. You get hit with a bat and there's something that knocks you off. What do you oftentimes, hey, I'm knocked off track. I need to get back on track. Are you just going right back to the same, when someone gets frustrated and they're like, I've already asked myself this. Well, we're defining priorities at that point, right? And we're trying to think of, hey, it was working. I was doing the right things. I was doing great. I'm knocked off track. Now what?
Yeah, I mean, I think this gets back to, having trust in the process and saying that, we're changing constantly as an individual. The world around us is changing constantly as a system. And it's only natural that life operates in ups and downs. So giving yourself leniency to understand that there is seasonality in life, there's seasonality in function of life, and that your down cycle, so to speak, is there not to cut you down, but for you to be challenged of all the training and hard work that you put into the system to get you through. So I look at, let's say, travel for me is a big deal. When I travel, it kills my routine or regimen, right? And like the way I look at travel is, well, this is what I'm training for, right? This is the down cycle when I go out, on a work trip for 3 days, and I've got to sleep out of a hotel, eat out of restaurants that I don't want to eat that the food because I don't know what's in it and it makes me feel a certain way. I have to prepare myself for those variables because it will affect me if I have the same set of expectations that I held myself to in my normal day, and I held that set of expectations when I travel. I will be met with a level of contradiction to the system that I will be emotionally distraught with. And so I've learned that my system that I deploy in my normal day within my ability to control is my training ground, and I'm training for the moments of life that cut me down. And that's when I say, well, now is my Super Bowl, right? I consider travel like Sundays when I'm playing games. as if football players train every week for that Sunday game and their goal is to go to the Super Bowl. Well, that's what these down cycles are. They're fucking tough games that are going to test my will and my mentality and my physical resiliency. And so I meet them head on.
We were talking about, you mentioned health there too, and about going and eating different restaurants. And you were talking to me about the periodic table of health elements. And it got me thinking about, what really inspired that? Was that, how does this framework really help people think differently about their lives as far as health?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that into the equation because, practically speaking, when I say discover, people say discover what? And when I say health, they say, well, health what? And so in my work, when I say health improvement and health transformation, health is generally thought of as disease, or the lack thereof disease, and generally tied to access to medical care or access to the health system. But in reality, the health of an individual happens outside of the healthcare system. Actually, the healthcare system in aggregate can only impact one person's health 11%, right? So check this out. $5 trillion of commercial value, 20% of our GDP, and that system only impacts the health of an individual 11%. So the other 89%, that is what is really called health, is your behavior, your environment, your physical circumstances, your genetics, and your biology, right? And so when you unpack what drives those categories, there's about 85 to 86 different drivers, like sleep, like nutrition, like financial stability, alcohol or substance abuse, how close your pharmacy is to you. These are various drivers. And so to give a visual orientation and a framework of these drivers to help with the discovery process of an individual to say, well, where should I focus my attention? We thought the analogy or analogous thinking of leveraging the periodic table of elements, as we all know from chemistry, and that we had plastered on every, elementary, high school, classroom, that made a lot of sense because there are 5 broad categories: medical access, behavioral, environment, physical environment, physical attributes, biology, and genetics. And so if we organize them across the color scheme in the columns similar to the periodic table of elements and dropped in the drivers, well, we now have the periodic table of health elements. And so that's the purpose. It's to be able to say, where do I want to start discovering? Do I really want to improve my health? Well, there's 85 different front doors, if you will, right? 85 different levers. If I'm an engineer, right, like music producer, I've got my engineering booth. I've got all these dials. Each one of them do something different. And if I understand the dials, I can make beautiful music from them, right? And so this is the periodic table of health elements for me. I feel like I'm Dr. Dre in my own life. I'm fucking making beautiful music every day because I know how these dials work. I know how to minimize and maximize different snares and bass and harmonies and melodies, etc., such that every day I live my best life. I'm fortunate because I've made a practice out of studying that board and experimenting against the board to understand what is going to bring me my most fruitful day. And so every day I get to make these little tweaks intentionally about the things I care about to maximize my output of living.
Do you think that you could see this actually in health books? I mean, you go back.
I would love it. I mean, my dream would be to see this in every classroom in the United States, if not globally, because it's the single most important thing to teach our children, that they have total control for the most part of their health. And so it's about choosing the hard of which one of these drivers are they going to start to work on, and being conscious and caring to learn about them, to define their stance on it, and to act accordingly to design and deliver their future selves. Like I always say, if I can teach my daughters to get excited about meeting their 80-year-old self and shaking the hand of the work that they did the years before to meet them, that's what they should be thinking about, right? Not jumping to 80, but having so much pride and so much grace, and appreciation, to for their 80-year-old self to thank them as 11-year-olds, as 12-year-olds, as 13-year-olds, as 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, for choosing the hard back then, because it's that 80-year-old self that's going to be, dying of disease and distraught with disabilities if they don't.
Yeah, I could think about the content and the health books that we had in high school and middle school, man. I could, was there true substance there? Who knows, right? I think the teachers make it. I had a really good health teacher that, oftentimes didn't open the book all that much. We had to do some of it, right? You had to complete some coursework, but I think this is a framework that literally everybody should see, and everybody should start concerning themselves with. And I definitely think you could plop this at the beginning of any health book in the high school in America today, and it have true. I mean, it's honestly can affect the future of America, the future of children, the future of health, and how you actually handle those things. Because there was nothing in the health books that taught us how to navigate anything from a health perspective, in my opinion, other than the fact that you need to do some exercise and, how many pull-ups are you doing, right?
Let's break down this one, I would say, important, and I'd be remiss not to bring it up, because I think it's for those that eat a certain way. This relationship between the brain and the gut is incredibly important, and it was very important. I used to eat fast food every single day. I mean, fried foods, everything. Again, from New Orleans, born and raised, my diet was horrific. And I had the self direction and pleasure to study neuroscience in college, and try to understand the relationship between the brain and the gut a little bit more, to where some critical knowledge that I feel like every person should understand, because it might help them think about what they put into their body a little bit more in the context of dopamine and serotonin. So these are neurotransmitters. Dopamine is released in the brain, and that's your short-term reward system. So, you eat a burger, you eat fries, the nutritional content of that burger or fries will fire against the dopamine neurotransmitters, which are saying, eat more of me, eat more of me. It is the same neurotransmitters that those that snort cocaine or do heroin, it is your addiction chemical, effectively saying, I like it right now, eat more of me. I like it right now, let's do more. However, when that substance, the burger or the fries, go into your gut's responsible for the production of serotonin, which is your long-term happiness neuron, right? Your neurotransmitters that are released by the gut, that travel up through the brain-gut axis and reach your brain and give you happiness long-term, right? And so when you eat that burger and fries, for simplicity purposes, it shuts down the serotonin neurotransmitters. So in this one action of eating this food, your brain is shortcutting the wellness of your body by saying, eat more of me. And then it's also saying, stop producing your long-term happiness. So what you're effectively doing every time you eat this food is saying, eat more, be happy less. Eat more, be happy less, right? And so, not to mention that the second component of the gut is where your inflammation comes from. So the triple component of this is, it says eat more, be happy less, and give me disease. Eat more, be happy less, and give me disease. And that's your simple equation. So what you put in your body literally is as simple as, is it saying, i.e., Burger King, McDonald's, high fructose corn syrup, du jour. It's made by food scientists, right, to fire upon the equation I just explained. Eat more, be happy less, and have more disease.
Wow. Every time I sip that Coca-Cola, I'm literally sipping more. It's pleasing the dopamine, the short term, drink more disease.
And it's inhibiting your ability to be happy over time.
And let's think about the antidepressants. They literally do what? They extend what serotonin you have left. And is there a true cure to that? No. If you're on an antidepressant for 18 years, it's not working.
That's right. That's why they say food is medicine. It's not a joke, and that's where it's hard, because we have to unwind really, 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 embedded behaviors of Western society that said convenience and short-term delight is a trade-off for long-term ability and sustainability, and to build the taste buds and the good habits of eating. It's hard, but if you do it, there's no greater reward.
I do notice a difference when I eat at home consistently, when I don't have soda. And I have a friend of mine that was telling me the other day, he's like, Jake, try to overeat steak and see how that works out for you. You know,
Well, it's right. I mean, like, this is where, like, again, I get back to, I'm my own biggest proponent of the processes I recommend in terms of discover, define, design, deliver. I mean, the level of education and knowledge and sheer research I've done for my own well-being to understand, how to be my best self is the only way I can talk confidently about the practice. But when you get into, you know is there an order of macronutrients and nutrition to prioritize? Then you're saying, well, is protein, fat, and carbs, is there a difference in terms of what sequence you should be eating those, right? And as it turns out, there is, right? So, like, if you prioritize protein has greater thermogenic effect, meaning your body takes more energy to actually digest it, which means you're actually burning calories while you're eating that steak. Additionally, because that's taking place, it's going to keep you full longer. The fat is going to work secondary to help you recover. So as your body is burning, your fat is supporting hormonal production and recovery, and your carbs are not having the glycemic impact that it would have if you just ate carbs first. So because your body is being fed in the right sequence, diabetics would have better ability to control their insulin production and glycemic, response, and so on. And so what you find is, right now there's this high protein craze in our culture, which I think is, appropriately focused on, because the body needs protein to stimulate muscle growth. Muscle growth is critical for longevity. And with high muscle growth, your body needs equal hormonal production. Thus, fat comes next, and then carbs just fill in the rest of your calories with the carbs. And in that, you're going to have sustained energy throughout the day. You'll be able to take more walks. You'll be able to burn, et cetera, et cetera. So it's that idea of, like, creating those positive cycles, those stackable wins. Even your body needs them.
I had a friend of mine that's a health nut, and he was telling me that that you can live on protein, you can live on fat, but you can't live on carbs alone. You have to have the building blocks. You have to have the protein and the fat. And so it kind of lines up with that as well. Now, what would you suggest that when people eat, I mean, so you really need to consume that protein first, essentially.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, you're unless you're a high endurance athlete and you're running, 15 miles, 20 miles or doing biking, like carbs are fuel. And so why would you need to fuel up and get sugar into your body flowing before you've done anything, right? And so when you look at managing your macros and managing your calories and supporting your body when it wakes, eating 30 to 50 grams of protein uh, in the morning. Like, I live by this mentality and methodology of eat like a king for breakfast, a queen for lunch, and a peasant for dinner. So you flip the significance of your meals such that I'm eating an 8-ounce steak in the morning for breakfast. I'm eating 2 eggs and some sweet potatoes. I have dinner literally for breakfast, right? And the reality is, I can go 4 or 5 hours without being hungry. So I'm not going into the cabinet, eating on nuts, eating on potato chips, et cetera, because I've given my body the necessary nutrients. Now, the ability to do that every day for everyone may not be the case, but grabbing some protein shake, putting it in a little milkshaker, drinking that, and having some nuts as you depart for work, that's doable, right? And that's going to keep you satiated and give your body the necessary protein. So the nutritionists say hit your protein goals first, then your fat goals, then fill in the rest of your calories with carbs.
And in my case, 40 or 50 carbs, no more.
Well, this is where you asked in our prep, in our first discussion last week. I think it was like, how do I think of advisors or mentors? And I said, kind of deploying this flexible human stack idea is similar. Like, I created a Michael Levy advisory board, right? Well, one of those advisors that I have is a performance coach, right? Like, what do I need to have a performance coach for? I'm not in any competition. Like, I'm not doing anything that in normal life would say I needed a performance coach, except I am. I'm trying to be the best I can be every day. And this person has helped me look at food through a lens of what my body needs, not what my mind needs. And this is the difference between dopamine and serotonin in a lot of respects. My mind needs a lot of different foods to feel good, to not be bored, to have experiences, right? But my body doesn't match that same need, right? So I've had to learn what my body needs and then feel good in my mind about giving it to it, right? And so it's a reversal of why we eat.
Love that. Love, expounding on that. I mean, so you got a, performance coach right now. I always like to ask people, just, is there anybody else that was like instrumental? Well, we can actually kind of start with, in your case, just, let's talk about your advisory board. Who do you got on it? And then, is there anybody else that, is kind of, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a family member, just somebody that's been there for you, or was instrumental in your career, that's kind of inspirational as well. But let's start out with the round out the board for me.
In the construct of family, self, family, work, and friends. I've got a handful of individuals, both close in age and far off in age. I think disparity or age dispersion is very important because, a 75, 80-year-old is not going to know what a 44-year-old is going through in today's world. But I try to look at, like, from the self perspective, who is in incredible shape, who has their kind of attitude and energy together, that I can look to as a mentor, to emulate, right? Like, this is where my performance coach comes in. This guy, he's a national, he competes nationally in the CrossFit Games, and he's younger than me, so he definitely is closer in age than my father, let's say. And he's a physical therapist. He competes in the CrossFit Games. He's got a wife. He's got children, and he obsesses over the same self mechanics as I do. But he's been doing it for way longer and is educated in the areas that I have not historically been educated in. So I was looking for somebody that could teach me and help me gain the self discipline. He has this, kind of model that full effort equals full victory, right? Full effort equals full victory. It does not matter what pound you put up. It does not matter how far you go. The question is, did you give it your full effort? Right? So if you give it your full effort, then you've won, right? You can't do more than that, right? And so this is the personal side where I have somebody that I hold as my mentor coach, but then I also have my brother and a couple other friends that actually see him as well, and together we've formed this kind of community of self-developing human beings in longevity and wellness. Well, that's somebody who can't come over to my work and talk to me about work and business. Like, so I got to go find other individuals that can mentor me and help me through tough situations. One is, somebody who was, a CEO of a multinational kind of medical therapeutics organization that, was a senior executive at Pfizer, ran senior care facilities across the U.S. And he himself is kind of on the same self, discipline journey, but not as far as I. He's about 20 years my older, and he helps me think through tough work situations. Like, hey, profitability is not going great right now. What are some levers I can push and pull? I'm dealing with this employee or staff member that I'm not sure the value's there, but they're great in certain situations. And so, I don't ever feel like I need to have all the answers. I need to have the questions, get back to discovery. And do I then have the people I can go to ask those questions and help me get the insight to then say, well, now I have the ability to choose. What do I do with that insight? How do I choose to do the hard? And so on and so forth.
So you got someone for business, you got someone for health. How about family, friends? You just have, you got kind of guys you do certain activities with, or anybody kind of just in your corner there as well?
Yeah. I mean, my business partner is someone whom, less business, more work ethic and perspective, shares a fairly stoic mindset. Somebody who, no matter how bad it is just, he's relentless. He just powers through. And every time, over the 10 years we've been running our business together, I've always, I've had moments of freaking out because business isn't going great, and maybe there's the end of the line, and he's like, no, we're gonna get through, we're gonna push through, it's okay, just trust it, just push it. And every single time there's something that happens that that gives us that extra light and extra life in the organization. So, I think keeping people that support you in the areas where you're weakest, and amplify areas that you're strongest. This is what you want to look for. So again, you can't build that composite unless you're very honest with yourself about who you are, how you tick, where your strengths and weaknesses are, where you want to build, where you don't need to build, what you can give, etc. So again, it gets back to like self-reflection, and obsession over the equation of what health means. But he's very, from a work perspective, just in terms of his attitude, his perspective, how strong he is to the discipline of progress and delivery. He's someone whose engine just goes.
What do you think helps keep him grounded when I mean, this probably may be a question for him, but it just sounds like he's such a, you know, what helps keep him grounded, is what is my thought whenever you were saying that. It's like, you got this guy's like, man, keep pushing through. And we all got times where we're just, you know, stuff isn't going the way we want it to. And what do you think keeps him grounded?
He's a Brit, and I think that's part of the British personality is, push on and carry forward, right? I've never seen him down. I've never seen him nervous. I've never seen him, scared and anxious. And I don't know exactly what that secret sauce is, but it's something that I've, he's a rock, right? Like he's just, got that tenacity to not give in to fear, and not give in to um, angst, where I think, you know, I've 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 drawn on over our 10 years running our business together over and over again. And I'm thankful for having that rock, because, there have been times where, I'm sure, taking a right turn and selling the business, or, selling other services that we don't sell today. We could have, there's so many different, I've said, so many different futures that we could have had if it weren't for him, kind of keeping us steady.
So, bringing all this full circle, if there's someone listening that feels stuck, you know, personally or professionally, what's the first small win that you'd challenge them to pursue?
I'd suggest taking out a white piece of paper, blank printer paper, and writing down what you're going to discover about yourself that you're willing to track. Simply collect data on one behavior that matters to you. And on the next side, put define. And then the next day, define what that means to you. So, day one, discover against some behavior that you are not happy with, that you want to get better in, that you think you're capable of changing. And then track how that behavior is manifesting in its day. So if it's food, let's just say you're writing down everything you're eating. You're not changing what you're eating. You're just going to track what you're eating. Call it a food diary. Okay. Then the next day, you flip that piece of paper and you define your feelings towards it, your emotions towards it. Are you happy with that food? Do you think you could change one meal to something else? Do you envision a world where that other side of the paper that you discovered on looks differently a month from now? Right. And then the second piece of paper, I'd write design, and I would put what that looked like, what I envisioned that day looking like if I were to change, right? and become a behavior that produced against that list of ingredients or nutrients or behaviors or actions, etc. And then in deliver, I would define my new set of emotions. How would I feel towards those? What would be the emotions that I would have with them? Because that's creating intentionality. That's being transparent and recognizing real and the hard that's necessary to uncover your elevated emotions, what it means to be pride filled, what it means to be joyous and empowered and elated to be you. What is true is when you track your current state and you're not happy, you're holding that in your body and you're carrying it forward. But if you start to track and be diligent on moving it into a future state that you have now labeled pride filled and empowered and joyous and accomplished, that's the choice you're making. That's the hard you're choosing. And that's what I would start. I would get obsessed with it, and I would use this model as I do every day with every aspect of my life.
One last question I wanted to ask you, just personally. People listening to this podcast may be like, man, Michael's got it together. He's got these frameworks. But what to you is living your best life? And what does that actually mean to you today?
I think I answer that simply by, when I lay down at night, did I give it full effort, right? Did I give it full effort? Because I can fall asleep with a big ass smile on my face if I knew that I gave it full effort. And full effort means when I wake up, I'm making choices about my intentions that I believe will lead to the best outcomes. That's it, right? And so I know every single day when I fall asleep, if it's my last day on earth, I'm good. I got nothing else to give. If tomorrow appears, I got a new fucking day to give. All right. And therefore it's new effort, new victory at the end of it. But I can't jump past the day I'm living. So it's about today. It's about working really hard to give today my attention and the fullest amount of effort I can give it, such that when I lay my head tonight on a made bed, I will have pride. I will feel responsibly charged for the day I had. And should tomorrow appear, God willing, I will attack it with the same equation. And if I'm allowed, day after day, year after year, I'll meet my 80-year-old self, and he will thank me for this pursuit.
Love it. Michael, let's tell people where they can learn more about your work. Where should they go to explore the periodic table of health elements, and your methodology with the 4D framework?
Yeah. Our website, dhitglobal.org, is where you'll find my work, my nonprofit work, the periodic table of health elements, the digital health innovation sprint, the health architect curriculum. You can find me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn handle is Health Transformer. And as it relates to my growth agency, bluedoor.us.
Michael, thank you for this conversation. It was incredibly meaningful. I took a lot from it. I'd love to have you back on the show and see what you're doing. I got a feeling that you're going to be continuing to do big stuff, and just like to go ahead and extend the invitation for next year. And, we'll kind of just go ahead and put it on the calendar and get you back on. And, and to everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, make sure to share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Jake. Have a good one, bud.
Remote First Innovators podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.